Open her bag. Richard Whitmore did not raise his voice. He did not have to. 30 conversations died beneath the crystal chandeliers as the white billionaire pointed at Danielle Brooks, the black maid standing alone beside the marble staircase. Security blocked the front doors behind her. Rain hammered the mansion windows. Danielle felt every face turned toward her. Sir, I have worked here for 3 years. Then you know exactly what is missing. Richard stepped closer, his tuxedo immaculate, his expression colder than the stone beneath her shoes. His $300,000 watch had vanished from his private study 20 minutes earlier. Danielle had been seen leaving that hallway. Now Richard wanted her searched in front of everyone. Open it, he ordered again. Danielle's fingers tightened around her handbag. Across the room, Richard's sister Evelyn watched over the rim of a champagne glass. Danielle noticed something strange in her expression. Not anger. Not surprise. Fear. I did not take anything, Danielle said. A guest near the fireplace whispered something under his breath. Another woman pulled her purse closer. Danielle saw it. Richard saw it too. He said nothing. The humiliation burned hotter than the fireplace behind her. If you are innocent, Richard said, you have nothing to hide. Danielle slowly handed her bag to security. The zipper sounded impossibly loud. Keys. A wallet. Hand lotion. A folded grocery receipt. Then the guard stopped moving. His hand remained inside the bag. Richard's jaw tightened. What is it? The guard pulled out a silver watch. Diamonds flashed beneath the chandelier. A collective gasp swept through the room. Danielle stared at it as if someone had placed a live wire in his hand. No. Richard took the watch. He turned it over. His initials were engraved on the back. Call the police. Danielle looked around the room, searching for one familiar face willing to meet her eyes. The chef looked down. The house manager stepped away. Even people who had watched Danielle serve their dinners, find their lost phones, and care for this house for years suddenly looked at her like a stranger. Mr. Whitmore, somebody put that in my bag. Richard gave a short, humorless laugh. Of course they did. Danielle's throat tightened. You already decided I am guilty. The evidence decided. No. Her voice was quiet, but it cut through the room. You did. Richard stepped closer. Be careful. Danielle could hear the rain, the low hum of the ventilation system, the faint ticking of the watch now resting in Richard's palm. She could also hear heels moving behind her. Evelyn. Slowly. Toward the hallway. Danielle's eyes followed her for half a second. Evelyn stopped. Their gazes met. That fear was there again. Stronger now. Danielle understood one thing with sudden certainty. The watch was not the mystery. It was the trap. 3 years? Richard said. 3 years I trusted you in my home? Danielle looked back at him. Did you? His face hardened. What is that supposed to mean? You trusted me to clean your bedroom. You trusted me around your son. You trusted me with keys to rooms your guests cannot enter. She glanced at the watch. But it took one piece of silver in my bag for all of that to disappear. Red and blue lights suddenly flickered through the rain-streaked windows. Police cruisers were turning through the gates. Richard exhaled through his nose. This is over. Danielle looked toward Evelyn again. She was gone. Then footsteps thundered down the staircase. Richard's 17-year-old son Noah appeared at the landing, pale and breathless, clutching his phone. Dad? Richard barely looked up. Go upstairs. Dad, stop. Something in Noah's voice made the room freeze. He descended slowly, staring not at Danielle, but at the watch in his father's hand. She could not have stolen that. Richard's eyes narrowed. You do not know what happened. Noah swallowed. Yes, I do. The front door opened, bringing in cold rain and 2 police officers. Noah raised his phone with a trembling hand. Because I saw who put it in her bag. Noah's words hit the room harder than the thunder outside. Richard turned slowly. What did you say? Noah came down the last few steps, his phone clenched so tightly his knuckles had gone white. The two police officers paused inside the doorway while rainwater darkened their shoulders. Danielle did not move. For the first time since the watch appeared, Richard was no longer looking at her. "I saw Aunt Evelyn holding Danielle's coat," Noah said. Richard's expression sharpened. "That proves nothing." "I know." Noah swallowed. "That is why I checked the garage camera." A murmur moved through the guests. Richard glanced toward the hallway where Evelyn had disappeared. "Show me." Noah unlocked his phone, but before the video loaded, one officer stepped forward. "Nobody leaves until we understand what happened." Richard's eyes flicked back to Danielle. There was still suspicion there. Danielle saw it, and somehow that hurt more than the accusation. Even now, with his own son questioning the story, Richard needed more proof before giving her the dignity he had taken away in seconds. Noah led them through the service corridor toward the garage. Guests followed at a distance, expensive shoes clicking across tile before turning dull against concrete. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The air smelled of rain, motor oil, and warm machinery. Richard's black sedan sat beside a silver sports car, both gleaming beneath the cold lights. Danielle stopped near the doorway. She hated that she was still being watched like a suspect. "The security cameras inside went offline at 8:43, Noah said. "But the car records movement around it." Richard looked at him. "Since when do you know that?" "Since someone scratched it last month." Noah opened the vehicle app. His thumb trembled against the screen. A video appeared. Grainy. Silent. Timestamped 8:47. Danielle's coat hung over a chair near the garage entrance. A figure entered the frame. The guests leaned closer. Danielle felt her pulse beating behind her ears. The figure reached toward the coat. Then the screen froze. "What happened?" Richard snapped. Noah tapped it again. Nothing. The file corrupted. Richard's shoulders stiffened. One guest sighed as if the interruption itself proved Danielle guilty. "Convenient," someone whispered. Danielle turned toward the voice. "For whom?" Silence. Then heels clicked from the corridor. Evelyn appeared beneath the fluorescent light, composed again, her champagne glass gone. "What is everyone doing down here?" Noah stared at her. "Where were you?" "Powder room." "For 10 minutes?" Evelyn smiled faintly. "Are you interrogating me now?" Richard stepped between them. "Enough." He looked exhausted, but his authority returned instantly. "The watch was found in Danielle's bag. Until there is actual evidence otherwise, that is what we have." Danielle felt something inside her go still. "Then arrest me." Richard blinked. "What?" "If that watch is enough, stop pretending this is an investigation." Her voice remained steady. "Do what you already decided to do." One officer studied Richard, then Danielle. Noah lowered his phone, frustration burning across his face. Evelyn said nothing. But Danielle noticed her right hand. It was shaking. Barely. Just enough to make the diamond bracelet at her wrist flicker beneath the garage lights. Then a mechanical chirp sounded behind them. Richard's sedan woke from sleep mode. Noah looked at his phone. Wait. A second recording had appeared, automatically uploaded from another camera angle. His face changed. "Dad?" Richard stepped closer. The footage began at 8:46. Evelyn entered the garage. She looked over her shoulder, walked directly to Danielle's coat, and slipped something into its pocket. Danielle stopped breathing. Richard's face strained of color. But Noah kept watching. "That is not the watch," he whispered. On screen, Evelyn moved to Richard's car, opened the rear door, and removed a thick manila envelope from beneath the seat. Richard suddenly grabbed the phone. "Where did she get that?" Evelyn backed toward the corridor. One officer noticed. "Ma'am, stay here." Richard zoomed in on the envelope. A blue corporate seal was visible across its corner. His hand began to tremble. "Those are Whitmore Foundation transfer records." Evelyn's composure vanished. Richard, I can explain. Danielle looked from the screen to Evelyn. The watch had never been the real crime. It had been camouflage. Richard lifted his eyes toward his sister, horror replacing anger. How much? Evelyn said nothing. Noah tapped another file. A list of bank transfers filled the screen. Richard stared at the total, then whispered, $8 million. Before anyone could speak, Danielle noticed something on the final transaction that made her blood run cold. The authorization did not carry Evelyn's name. It carried hers. Danielle stared at her own name on the $8 million transfer. For one terrible second, even she forgot how to breathe. Then Richard looked at her, and the suspicion returned. You signed this? His voice was low. Cold. Danielle lifted her eyes. No, your name is right there. So was your watch. The garage went silent. Fluorescent light flashed across the silver cars while rain rattled against the metal door. Somewhere behind them, a phone camera chimed on. One guest was recording now. Then another. Richard noticed. Put those phones away. Nobody moved. Danielle stepped toward Noah's screen. Let me see the transfer. Richard pulled the phone back. You have done enough. That landed harder than he intended. Danielle's jaw tightened. You still think I did this? I think $8 million disappeared under your authorization. Evelyn stood behind him, pale but suddenly steadier. Richard, maybe we should let the police handle her. Danielle turned. Handle me? Evelyn's eyes narrowed. You had access to this house. His office. His passwords. No, Danielle said. I had access to his rooms. That is not the same thing. The officer raised a hand. Everyone stay calm. But Danielle was already studying the transfer displayed on Noah's phone from several feet away. Her eyes caught the date. Then the approval time. Something shifted in her face. Zoom in. Richard frowned. Why? Because whoever forged that authorization made a mistake. Noah enlarged the document. Danielle pointed. 2:13 in the afternoon. March 18th. Richard stared at her. What about it? I was not here. Evelyn gave a quick laugh. That is your defense? Danielle ignored her. Your mother had surgery that day, Mr. Whitmore. You gave the staff the afternoon off. Richard's expression changed slightly. He remembered. That does not prove you were not involved. Danielle's eyes hardened. Then check where I was. Noah was already moving. I remember. Danielle drove Grandma to the hospital. Richard looked at his son. How do you know? Because you asked her to. Another silence. This one felt different. Richard's control was beginning to crack. Danielle leaned closer to the transfer. The blue light from the phone sharpened her face. There is something else. She pointed at the authorization code. Your accounting system changed last year. Richard blinked. How would you know that? Evelyn answered before Danielle could. Exactly. Her voice rose. Why would a maid know anything about corporate accounting? Several guests exchanged looks. Danielle felt their attention shift again, but she did not retreat. Because your finance department throws confidential documents into regular recycling. Richard's face tightened. You read my company records? I clean around them. She looked directly at him. People notice things when everyone assumes they are invisible. Noah zoomed further. Danielle pointed again. This code has 6 digits. Your current system uses 8. Richard's eyes snapped toward the screen. She is right, Noah whispered. Evelyn's face lost color. Danielle continued. That transfer was not approved in March. The document was created from an older template and backdated. The officer turned toward Evelyn. Ma'am, where were you on March 18th? Evelyn's lips parted. No answer came. A phone camera clicked behind her. Richard stepped forward. Evelyn, do not do this here. Answer him. I said I can explain. Then explain. Evelyn looked at Danielle, and the fear in her eyes became something sharper. Ask your maid why her employee identification number is embedded in the file. Danielle froze. Richard looked back at the screen. Beneath the authorization line was a personnel code. Her code. Exact. Noah's confidence vanished. Danielle? Richard whispered. Danielle stared at the numbers, then slowly shook her head. That should be impossible. Evelyn almost smiled. Unless it was you. Richard's hand closed around the phone. The crowd seemed to lean toward Danielle again, ready to condemn her for the second time. But Danielle was no longer looking at the transfer. She was staring at the timestamp in the file properties. Her pulse quickened. Noah, open the creation history. Why? Because Evelyn just made her second mistake. He tapped the screen. A creation date appeared. Tonight. 8:39. 4 minutes before the mansion cameras went dark. Richard went completely still. Danielle looked at Evelyn. This file was created inside this house. Then Noah opened the device log beneath it, and his face went white. Dad? Richard looked down. The forged transfer had not been created on Danielle's phone. It had not been created on Evelyn's laptop either. The device registered to the file belonged to Richard Whitmore himself. Richard stared at the device log as if his own name had become evidence against him. That is my laptop. The words barely left his mouth before whispers rippled through the garage. Phone cameras lifted higher. Cold fluorescent light flashed across chrome, glass, and Richard's suddenly pale face. Turn those off, he snapped. Nobody listened. Danielle watched sweat gather beneath his cuff as his hand tightened around Noah's phone. Someone used your laptop, she said. Richard turned on her. Do not tell me what happened in my own house. Then stop ignoring what happened in front of you. His jaw locked. The garage door motors hummed overhead, vibrating through the concrete. Evelyn stepped closer. Richard, she is manipulating this. First the watch, now company records. She knows too much. Danielle looked at her. That is what scares you. Evelyn's face hardened. One of the officers moved between them. Nobody is leaving. Richard exhaled sharply. My laptop was locked in my study all evening. Danielle's eyes narrowed. Was it? I know where I keep my property. You also knew where you kept your watch. The silence after that was brutal. Richard's pride flashed across his face. Careful, Danielle. She could feel 30 pairs of eyes pressing against her back, waiting for the maid to remember her place. Instead, she stepped toward the screen. Open the login history. Noah did. A row of timestamps appeared. 8:37. Password accepted. 8:39. Transfer document created. 8:41. External drive connected. 8:43. Security cameras offline. Danielle's pulse accelerated. Those events are connected. Richard shook his head. My cybersecurity team would have caught an intrusion. There was no intrusion. You are a housekeeper. The words came out sharper than he intended. The room reacted before Danielle did. A few guests lowered their eyes. Noah stared at his father. Danielle let the insult hang between them. Then she pointed at the screen. Exactly. I empty the trash beside your desk every night. Richard frowned. What does that have to do with anything? Your laptop makes a sound when the docking station disconnects. 2 short tones. She glanced toward the mansion. I heard them tonight at 8:41. Richard's expression shifted. From where? The dining room. Noah understood first. Dad's study is almost 80 feet away. Danielle nodded. Which means the sound did not come from his study. Richard looked toward the black sedan. Heat shimmered faintly above its hood. Then where? Danielle turned toward the garage workbench. A small metal cabinet sat beneath a charging station. There. Evelyn's breathing changed. Barely. Danielle caught it. So did Noah. Richard crossed the concrete floor, his shoes striking hard in the silence. He opened the cabinet. Cleaning supplies. Extension cords. Nothing else. Evelyn released a breath. Richard looked back at Danielle with something almost triumphant. You were wrong. Danielle did not answer. Her eyes had settled on a thin black cable disappearing behind the cabinet. Move it! Richard laughed once. Enough. Move the cabinet. You are in no position to give orders. Danielle stepped forward anyway. Then let the officer do it. One officer crouched, pulled the cabinet several inches from the wall, and stopped. Behind it sat a compact docking hub, still warm, connected to an Ethernet line running into the house. A tiny green light blinked in the darkness. Noah whispered, Someone brought Dad's laptop down here. Richard's confidence vanished. The officer reached behind the cabinet and lifted a black flash drive. Evelyn suddenly turned toward the door. Ma'am. The second officer blocked her path. Every phone in the garage swung toward her. Richard looked at his sister. Why are you leaving? Because this is insane. Then stay. Her eyes flashed. You are going to believe a maid over your own sister? Danielle flinched, but Richard did not answer. For the first time, he looked at Evelyn the way he had looked at Danielle upstairs. Suspiciously. The reversal was small, but everyone felt it. Noah inserted the drive into an offline tablet the officer provided. Dozens of folders appeared. Bank records. Foundation accounts. Employee files. Copies of Richard's signature. Then Danielle saw a folder carrying her full name. Open that. Inside were scans of her identification, payroll information, employee code, and photographs of her work schedule. Richard's face collapsed. Someone had been building a false trail around Danielle for months. Evelyn, he whispered. I did not make those. Danielle studied the file dates. Her eyes stopped on one folder created 6 months earlier. Wait. She opened it. There were names inside. Not just hers. 6 former Whitmore employees, all connected to missing money, lost jewelry, or unexplained dismissals. Richard stared at the list, horror spreading across his face. They were all accused of stealing. Danielle looked at him. And you fired every one of them. Richard could not speak. Then Noah scrolled to the final file. It was created tonight. The file name was not Danielle's. It was his. Richard's son went completely still. Danielle felt the temperature leave the room. Noah opened it. A scheduled transfer filled the screen, $42 million, set to execute at midnight. Beneath it was a second document already prepared for investigators. Richard read the name of the person designated to take the blame. His eyes lifted slowly toward his son. Noah. From somewhere inside the mansion, a clock began striking 11. The clock struck 11, and Noah's name glowed beneath a $42 million transfer scheduled to move in exactly 1 hour. Richard stared at his son, then at Danielle. Nobody touches anything. His voice cracked across the garage, but the authority behind it was slipping. Phones kept recording. Investors whispered beneath the fluorescent hum. Somewhere under the sedan, a cooling engine ticked against hot metal. Danielle looked closer at the transfer. This is not about stealing your money. Richard snapped toward her. $42 million says otherwise. Then why frame Noah? That stopped him. Evelyn stood near the blocked doorway, her face strained beneath the cold light. Danielle pointed at the screen. The money is supposed to disappear at midnight. Noah takes the blame. Your foundation collapses. But whoever built this wanted you alive to watch it happen. Richard's breathing shortened. You are guessing. No. Look at the destination. Noah zoomed in. 3 holding companies. 2 offshore accounts. A final beneficiary hidden behind an identification code. Richard turned toward one of the men near the garage entrance. Martin Cole, Whitmore Foundation's chief financial officer, went rigid. The investors around him stepped away. Richard, do not start accusing people because your maid learned how to read a spreadsheet. Danielle felt the insult land, but she did not look away. I know enough to see the routing number repeats. Martin's smile disappeared. What? The second transfer and the fourth. Danielle pointed. Same receiving bank. Different company names. Richard leaned toward the tablet. His hand was sweating against the glass. Martin laughed nervously. That means nothing. Then you will not mind if they check. A phone camera clicked. Martin's eyes darted toward it. Richard suddenly slammed his palm onto the workbench. Turn the cameras off! His voice echoed through the concrete room. This is my family. My company. Nobody obeyed. Noah stepped closer to him. Dad, they are recording because you accused Danielle in front of everyone. Richard looked at his son as if the words had struck somewhere private. Not now. When? Noah's voice trembled. After you blamed somebody else? Richard's face tightened. I was protecting this family. Danielle spoke quietly. From me? The garage fell silent. Richard turned. Danielle stood beneath the hard white light in the same uniform she had worn while serving his guests. Her handbag still sat open on a workbench, empty like evidence. You searched me before you searched your own house, she said. Richard's mouth opened, but no answer came. Evelyn suddenly stepped forward. Enough. She is turning you against everyone. Danielle looked at her. No. Someone already did that. Then an alarm chirped from the tablet. Noah flinched. What is that? A red countdown appeared beside the transfer. 56 minutes remaining. Beneath it, another process had started. Remote data deletion. Richard's face changed. Stop it! Noah tapped the screen. I cannot! Stop it! Dad, I cannot! Richard grabbed his phone and called his security chief. No signal. Another investor checked his phone. Nothing. The garage Wi-Fi vanished. Then the overhead door shuttered halfway down before stopping with a metallic groan. The fluorescent lights flickered. Someone whispered, What is happening? Danielle heard something beneath the panic, a soft electronic beep from behind the workbench. Once. Twice. She turned toward the docking hub. Someone is still connected. Martin stepped backward. Evelyn did not move. Danielle crouched beside the hub and followed the Ethernet cable with her eyes. It did not run toward the house network. It disappeared through the wall toward Richard's private office wing. The deletion is local, she said. Richard stared at her. Meaning? Whoever is doing this is still inside the house. The room erupted in whispers. One officer immediately spoke into his radio. Danielle rose, her pulse hammering. And if they erase those files, everyone framed before me stays guilty. That silenced Richard. The names of 6 former employees were still visible on the tablet. People he had fired. People he had never believed. His shoulders dropped for the first time. What have I done? He whispered. Then the tablet chimed again. Noah looked down. A recovered audio file had appeared before deletion could reach it. There is a recording. Richard pressed play. Static filled the garage. Then Evelyn's voice came through, unmistakable and terrified. I did what you told me. The watch is in Danielle's bag. Leave Noah out of this. Richard slowly turned toward his sister. Evelyn's eyes filled with panic. But another voice answered from the recording, distorted and low. Too late. At midnight the boy takes the fall. Everyone froze. Danielle stared at the tablet. Evelyn was involved. But she was not in control. Then footsteps sounded from the dark service corridor behind them. Slow. Measured. Coming closer. Richard looked toward the doorway as a familiar silhouette stepped into the cold garage light, and Danielle realized the real architect of the entire night had been standing inside the Whitmore mansion all along. The silhouette stepped into the fluorescent light, and Richard stopped breathing. Martin? His chief financial officer said nothing. He simply closed the service door behind him. The soft click traveled through the garage like a warning. Danielle watched him carefully. His tie was gone. His sleeves were rolled once at the wrists. In his hand was Richard's missing laptop. Evelyn lowered her eyes. Noah moved closer to his father. Around them, the garage had become unnaturally quiet. Even the cooling engine seemed to settle into silence. "You were supposed to leave," Evelyn whispered. Martin looked at her. "So were you." Richard's face tightened. "Put my laptop down." Martin almost smiled. "Still giving orders?" A phone vibrated somewhere among the guests. Nobody reached for it. Danielle could feel every eye moving between the billionaire, his sister, and the man who had controlled his money for 11 years. Martin placed the laptop on the hood of the sedan. The metal gave a faint tick beneath the remaining engine heat. "You want the truth?" he asked. "Here it is. Your foundation was bleeding money long before tonight." Richard stepped forward. "You stole from me. Not everything is about you." Danielle noticed Martin's left thumb pressing repeatedly against the laptop edge. Once. Pause. Twice. The same rhythm as the deletion warning. She said nothing. "Not yet." Richard pointed toward the officers. "Take him." "On what charge?" Martin asked calmly. "A recording with a distorted voice? A laptop anyone could carry?" His eyes moved toward Danielle. "Or are we trusting the maid now because she happened to guess correctly twice?" The insult hung there. This time, nobody laughed. Danielle saw something new in the faces around her. Shame. One woman slowly lowered her phone. Richard looked at Danielle, then at the open handbag still emptied across the workbench. He could not hold her gaze. Martin noticed. "Do not lose your nerve, Richard. The watch was in her bag. Her identification is in the files. Her employee code authorized transfers." Danielle finally spoke. "And you know exactly how all three got there." Martin's eyes settled on her. "Do I? You built the evidence backward." A faint hum came from the laptop fan. Danielle stepped closer. "You started with the person you knew Mr. Whitmore would suspect fastest." Richard flinched. She did not look at him. "Then you made the technology agree with his prejudice." Silence. Cold light reflected in the black paint between them. Martin's expression barely changed, but his thumb stopped moving. Danielle saw it. "That is why the timestamps are wrong," she continued. "Why old authorization codes appear in new files. Why my identification was copied instead of authenticated." Noah looked at her. "Copied?" Danielle nodded toward the employee records. "My middle initial is wrong." Richard's head lifted. Danielle pointed to the screen. "It says Danielle M. Brooks." She touched the small silver badge pinned to her uniform. "My middle name is Elise." Noah stared at the document. Then at her badge. The officer checked Danielle's identification. "She is right." A murmur passed through the garage. Danielle looked at Richard at last. "Your payroll file has been wrong since the day I started." His face changed. He remembered signing her employment paperwork without reading it. "So whoever built those files," Noah whispered, "copied the company database. Not my actual identification," Danielle said. Martin's jaw tightened. It was almost invisible. Almost. Richard saw it. For the first time that night, the billionaire stepped away from Martin and toward Danielle. Not in front of her. Beside her. The movement was only 2 feet, but the entire room felt it. Evelyn covered her mouth. Richard's voice dropped. "I accused you because of evidence someone manufactured from records I never bothered to question." Danielle said nothing. Her silence was worse than anger. Richard looked at the bag he had ordered searched, then at the guests who had watched him do it. His shoulders lowered. "And you saw the mistakes before anyone I paid to protect me?" Danielle's eyes remained steady. "Because nobody was looking for mistakes. They were looking for proof that I did it." Richard had no answer. The laptop suddenly chimed. 11:23. The deletion process stopped. Noah exhaled. It stopped. Danielle did not. She looked at Martin. He was smiling now. Barely. No, she whispered. It finished. The screen went black. Then Richard's phone vibrated. So did Noah's. Then every investor's phone in the garage began vibrating almost simultaneously. One by one, faces turned pale beneath the fluorescent lights. Richard opened the message. His company's private financial records had just been sent to every major investor on the board. Attached was a statement accusing Richard Whitmore of personally authorizing years of fraudulent transfers. His knees nearly gave beneath him. They will destroy me. Danielle looked at the timestamp. 11:23. 37 minutes before the $42 million was supposed to move. Something did not fit. She turned toward Martin. You did not come here to steal the money. His smile disappeared. Danielle's voice fell almost to a whisper. You came here to make sure Richard was blamed before the transfer ever happened. Noah looked at the countdown, then suddenly froze. Danielle. He turned the tablet toward her. The destination account had changed. The $42 million was no longer scheduled to leave the Whitmore Foundation. It was scheduled to arrive there. Danielle stared at the screen as the final piece began sliding into place. Then she looked at Richard. Someone is not robbing you. Her eyes shifted slowly toward the 6 former employees whose names remained on the recovered files. Someone is returning what was stolen. Someone is returning what was stolen. Danielle's words settled over the garage, and for 3 long seconds, nobody moved. Richard stared at the incoming $42 million transfer while cold light carved every line of panic across his face. Returning it from where? Danielle stepped closer to the tablet. Not one account. 6. Noah's fingers moved across the screen. 6 routing paths appeared, each tied to one of the former employees Richard had fired. The room went silent again. Martin's comm finally cracked. Do not touch that. Danielle looked at him. That is the first honest thing you have said tonight. Phone cameras rose. A cooling engine clicked beneath the silence. Richard turned toward Martin. You used them? Richard, listen to me. You framed 6 people? Martin's eyes flicked toward the officers. You signed every termination. The words hit Richard harder than an accusation. He looked at the names on the screen, then at Danielle's open handbag on the workbench. The pattern was suddenly unbearable. Missing property. Manufactured evidence. A convenient employee. A quick dismissal. Every time, Richard had believed the accusation because believing it was easier than questioning the people beside him. Danielle studied the transfer paths. Something still bothered her. Noah, open the memo fields. Why? Because money leaves fingerprints. Martin took one step forward. An officer stopped him. Noah opened the first transfer. A short code appeared. Then another. Danielle read them silently. These are payroll numbers. Richard frowned. For who? Danielle looked toward the 6 names. For them. Noah checked. His mouth fell open. Each incoming amount matched money previously blamed on a fired employee, plus lost wages and interest. Richard's voice became almost inaudible. Who set this up? Danielle looked at the transaction authorization. Someone with access to the Foundation audit. Every face turned toward Martin. He shook his head. This is insane. No, Danielle said. This is an audit trail. She pointed to a repeating approval token buried beneath the transfers. That token appears in every false case. Mine too. Richard leaned closer. Whose token? Noah searched the internal directory. The tablet loaded. Then stopped. Martin Cole. The garage erupted. Investors spoke over one another. Cameras chimed. Evelyn covered her face. Richard did not move. His entire empire had just shifted beneath his feet, and the woman he had publicly humiliated was the only person standing still. Martin's voice sharpened. She planted that. Nobody looked at Danielle this time. They looked at him. The reversal was complete. She is a maid, Martin insisted. She does not understand financial systems. Richard slowly turned toward him. Apparently she understands mine better than you hoped. Martin went pale. Danielle felt the words land differently than praise. Richard was finally defending her, but hours too late. One officer took possession of the laptop and flash drive. The other asked Evelyn to step aside for questioning. Evelyn's eyes filled. Richard, I never wanted Noah involved. But Danielle was acceptable? Richard asked. Evelyn could not answer. Danielle looked away. She had imagined vindication would feel warm. It did not. It felt like standing in the ruins after everyone finally admitted the fire was real. Then Noah noticed a new file appearing on the tablet. Wait. The $42 million transfer had completed. A second window opened automatically. 6 payment confirmations filled the screen. The stolen money had been restored. Beneath them appeared a final document, an independent forensic audit scheduled months earlier. Richard stared at the signature authorizing it. That is my mother's. Noah looked up. Grandma knew? Danielle's breath caught. Richard's mother had died 4 months earlier. The audit contained a recorded statement. Noah pressed play. An elderly woman's voice filled the garage. If you are hearing this, then Martin tried to move the foundation money again. Richard closed his eyes. His mother continued. I could prove the theft. I could not prove how he kept finding innocent people to carry the blame. Danielle looked toward Evelyn. Tears slipped silently down her face. He threatened me, she whispered. He had documents. Messages. He said Noah would be next if I did not plant the watch. Richard's face collapsed. The billionaire who had commanded the room all night suddenly looked very small beneath the fluorescent lights. His mother's recording continued. Richard, your greatest weakness has never been trusting the wrong people. He opened his eyes. It is deciding too quickly who deserves your trust. Nobody spoke. Richard looked across the garage at Danielle. The empty purse. The uniform. The woman he had condemned before asking a single real question. His eyes reddened. He took one step toward her. Danielle! She did not move. Then his mother's voice returned with one final sentence. And if Danielle Brooks is standing there when you hear this, ask her why she never told you what happened to her father. Richard froze. Danielle's composure vanished for the first time all night. Noah turned toward her. Even Martin looked up. Richard whispered, Your father? Danielle stared at the dark tablet, her eyes suddenly wet. When she finally answered, her voice was barely audible. He was the first person your company accused. He was the first person your company accused. Danielle's words barely rose above the hum of the garage lights, but Richard reacted as if the floor had shifted beneath him. Nobody spoke. The phones were still recording, yet even the guests holding them seemed to forget they were there. Richard swallowed. What was his name? Danielle looked at him. Samuel Brooks. Recognition came slowly, then all at once. Richard's face emptied. The warehouse audit. Danielle nodded. 12 years ago. Noah watched his father. You knew him? Richard stared at the concrete floor. I signed his termination. Danielle's breathing remained measured, but her fingers curled against her palm. My father worked for Whitmore for 19 years. One morning, money disappeared. By afternoon, security walked him past everyone he knew. Richard closed his eyes. The fluorescent lights reflected across the moisture gathering beneath them. There was evidence. There was always evidence. That silenced him. Danielle glanced toward the 6 names still glowing on the tablet. A missing deposit. A copied identification number. Something planted where it could be found. Her eyes returned to Richard. Different employee. Same story. Evelyn covered her mouth. Noah lowered his phone. Even the investors stopped whispering. Danielle continued quieter now. My father told you he was innocent. Richard's voice broke. I remember. Do you remember what you told him? Richard did not answer. Danielle did. People like you always have an excuse. The sentence hung in the garage. Richard flinched. Around him, faces changed. Guests who had watched Danielle's bag being emptied now looked at Richard with the discomfort they had once reserved for her. He stared at his own hands. I said that? You did. Danielle, he never worked in finance again. Her voice remained controlled. That made it hurt more. He drove delivery trucks. Worked nights. Lost our house. But he never let me hate this family. Richard looked up, stunned. Then why did you come work here? Danielle's eyes moved toward the dark mansion beyond the service corridor. Because before he died, he told me something was wrong. He said innocent people would keep getting blamed if nobody stayed close enough to notice the pattern. Noah whispered. You came here looking for proof. Danielle shook her head. At first. A faint vibration moved through the ventilation system. Then your grandmother figured out what I was doing. Richard looked toward the tablet carrying his mother's final recording. Danielle continued. She believed my father. She started the independent audit because of him. Richard's knees seemed to weaken. He leaned against the sedan, its hood still warm beneath his palm. My mother knew for months. Yes. And she never told me. Danielle's gaze softened, but only slightly. She tried. Richard understood before she finished. His mother had questioned old terminations. Asked him to reopen files. Challenged Martin's numbers. Richard had dismissed every concern as grief, age, interference. Now each forgotten conversation returned with brutal clarity. He pressed his fingers against his eyes. I did this. Martin did this, Noah said. Richard shook his head. Martin stole the money. He looked at Danielle's open handbag. I gave him the perfect system. Martin stood silent beside the officers. His confidence was gone. Evelyn quietly began to cry. Richard pushed himself upright and turned toward the guests. His voice trembled. Everyone who watched me accuse Danielle tonight, keep recording. Several phones rose again. Danielle looked at him, surprised. Richard stepped into their cameras. Danielle Brooks did not steal from me. I accused her without a fair investigation. I humiliated her in my home, in front of my family, my employees, and my investors. His throat tightened. And I was wrong. Nobody moved. Richard looked directly at Danielle. Worse, I made the same mistake with her father 12 years ago. A gasp moved through the room. Tomorrow morning, every case connected to these files will be reopened by independent investigators. Every former employee will receive a public correction before this company releases another statement about me. Martin's expression collapsed. Danielle did not smile. She did not celebrate. She simply stood straighter. For the first time that night, nobody saw the uniform first. Richard approached her slowly. I cannot give your father those years back. Danielle's eyes glistened. No, I can restore his name. She held his gaze. Do not do it for me. Richard stopped. Then for who? Danielle looked toward the 6 names on the tablet. For the next person nobody believes. Richard lowered his head. Behind him, one of the officers escorted Martin toward the door while another remained with Evelyn. No applause came. It would have felt wrong. Only the soft buzz of lights and the fading tick of cooling engines filled the garage. Then Noah walked to Danielle and handed her something recovered from the evidence table, Richard's silver watch. Danielle stared at it. Why are you giving me this? Noah turned it over. Beneath Richard's initials was a second engraving nobody had noticed. Samuel Brooks. Richard saw the name and went completely still. Danielle's hand began to tremble. That watch! Her voice disappeared. Richard stepped closer, staring at the engraving as if a ghost had spoken through the metal. Then his mother's recorded voice unexpectedly resumed from the tablet behind them. Richard, if you finally found Samuel's watch, there's one last thing Danielle deserves to know. Richard's mother's voice filled the garage one last time. That watch never belonged to you, Richard. Nobody moved. The fluorescent lights reflected across the silver case in Danielle's trembling hand, while the last warmth from the cars faded into the cold concrete air. Samuel Brooks found it 12 years ago, the recording continued. The night before he was accused. Richard slowly looked at Danielle. Her thumb rested over her father's engraved name. He found evidence inside Martin's office that money was being moved through false vendor accounts. He brought the watch to me because Martin had left it beside the documents. Danielle's eyes closed. Her father had not stolen the watch. He had carried it as evidence. Richard's mother paused on the recording, her breath faint through the old microphone. Samuel tried to tell us the truth. Martin accused him first. And Richard believed the louder man. Richard lowered his head. No defense came. No explanation. Around him, the investors who had once watched Danielle with suspicion now stood with their phones lowered at their sides. The cameras had stopped mattering. I kept the watch, his mother continued, because one day I hoped it would help clear Samuel's name. I am sorry that day came too late. The recording ended. A tiny electronic click followed. Then silence. Danielle stared at the watch. For years, she had remembered her father coming home after midnight in a wrinkled work shirt, carrying a cardboard box filled with 19 years of his life. He had never told her about the watch. He had only said, "Do not let what they think of you decide who you become." Richard stepped toward her, then stopped several feet away. This time, he did not assume he had permission to come closer. "I remember him standing in my office," he said quietly. "He kept asking me to check the accounts." Danielle looked up. "And did you?" Richard shook his head. "No." His voice was almost gone. "I looked at the accusation. I looked at his job title. I looked at who was standing beside me." His eyes shifted toward the officers escorting Martin away. "And I chose who was easier to believe." Danielle said nothing. Richard swallowed. "I cannot ask you to forgive that." "Then do not." The answer was gentle. Somehow, that made it heavier. Richard nodded. "What can I do?" Danielle looked toward the tablet. 6 names remained on the screen. Samuel Brooks made 7. "Tell the truth when it costs you something." Richard followed her gaze. He understood. By sunrise, the Whitmore Foundation board had received Richard's resignation as chairman pending an independent investigation. Every termination connected to Martin's scheme was frozen for review. Samuel Brooks' personnel record was formally reopened. Richard refused the public relations statement his attorneys prepared. Instead, he signed a shorter one himself. Samuel Brooks was innocent. Danielle Brooks was innocent. Whitmore failed them both. Nothing more. Near 6 in the morning, the last police vehicle rolled beyond the estate gates. The storm had passed. Pale sunlight entered the garage through the narrow windows, touching the concrete where Danielle's belongings had been scattered hours earlier. She quietly returned her wallet, keys, lotion, and grocery receipt to her bag. Richard stood nearby but did not help. He seemed to understand that even kindness could become another performance if offered at the wrong moment. Noah approached and held out Danielle's employee badge. She looked at it for a second, then unclipped the matching badge from her uniform. "Are you leaving?" he asked. "Yes." Richard's eyes lifted. "You will have full pay for as long as you need. And if you want another position..." Danielle gave him a small look. He stopped himself. "Sorry." For the first time that night, something almost like warmth crossed her face. "You are learning." Noah smiled through tired eyes. Richard did not. He looked at the watch still resting in Danielle's palm. "That belongs to your family." Danielle closed her fingers around it. "It always did." She walked toward the open garage door. Her shoes made soft, measured sounds against the concrete. Nobody blocked her path now. Nobody asked to search her bag. Behind her, investors, officers, staff, and one humble billionaire simply watched. At the threshold, Richard spoke. "Danielle." She stopped but did not turn immediately. "Your father deserved better from me." Morning light touched the side of her face. So did the 6 people after him. Richard nodded. They will get it. Danielle finally turned. Make sure the people after them never need it. No accusation lived in her voice anymore. Only expectation. Richard lowered his eyes. Danielle stepped outside. The wet driveway shone beneath the first clean light of morning, and birds had begun calling from somewhere beyond the estate walls. She opened her hand once more. Samuel Brooks' name caught the sunlight on the back of the watch. The second hand moved steadily forward. Behind her, Richard removed his own Whitmore Foundation badge and placed it silently on the workbench beside the empty space where Danielle's bag had been searched. No one spoke. Danielle walked down the driveway carrying the one thing money had never been able to return to her father until now: his name, finally clean.